Hello, dreamer. I'll be your storyteller tonight. Like and subscribe for more bedtime stories and share in the comments where you're listening from. I was trained to smile, to stand at the boarding door, greeting each passenger like a friend I'd never met. But no training prepares you for the ones who don't belong. That night, the flight was full. Every seat sold, every passenger accounted for. We were flying from Denver to New York, a red-eye. The kind of flight where everyone just wants to close their eyes and forget they're 30,000 feet above the earth. The cabin smelled of coffee, plastic, and the faint tang of jet fuel. The hum of the engines made the floor vibrate under my shoes. Routine, ordinary, safe, until the last passenger boarded. He came in late. Too late. After the doors should have been closed, but somehow, the gate agent let him through. He walked with a calm, steady pace. No rushing, no apologies. Just a pale man with a boarding pass in his hand. I smiled, because that's what I do. "Good evening, sir." "Welcome aboard." He didn't reply. His eyes slid past me into the cabin, like he already knew where he was going. Row 14, seat C. That's where he stopped. And that's where the trouble began, because someone was already sitting there. A young man in a hoodie, headphones in, scrolling through his phone. He looked up confused when the pale man loomed over him. "You're in my seat," the man said, flat voice. No tone, just certain. The young man frowned, pulled out his boarding pass and showed it. No, this is mine. 14C, see?" The pale man lifted his own ticket. 14C, same flight, same number, same name. The name on both tickets was identical. Michael Reeves. I froze. I'd seen mistakes before. Double bookings, wrong flights, passengers boarding with tickets for yesterday's flight. But never. Two men on the same flight with the same name, the same seat. I leaned closer, forcing my voice into calm, polite shapes. "Gentlemen, let me check this for you. One of you must be assigned somewhere else." The young man gave a nervous laugh. "Yeah, obviously. It's mine. I booked weeks ago," but the pale man didn't laugh. He just stared, unblinking, like he was waiting for me to move him aside. The other passengers nearby began to whisper. Heads craned. Eyes darted between the two men, and I felt it. That subtle shift in the air when something isn't right, like static building before a storm. I excused myself, took both boarding passes, and went to the purser at the front of the plane. She scanned them into the manifest system. Both passes beeped green. Both confirmed. Both valid. She looked at me, pale. This shouldn't be possible, but it was. And the plane was waiting. We couldn't delay forever. When I returned to row 14, the pale man was still standing, staring at the young man in the hoodie. Neither had moved. Neither had blinked. "All right," I said softly, forcing the smile back onto my face. "Mr. Reeves." I paused, realizing the absurdity. "Both of you. We'll reseat one of you. We'll find a place." The young man muttered, "Fine, whatever," and began gathering his things. But the pale man leaned down, close, too close, and whispered something I didn't hear. The young man froze. His face went slack, then slowly he sat back down. "I'll stay," he said, voice flat, like it wasn't his choice. The pale man slipped into the seat beside him, both of them in row 14. Both buckled in, like nothing was wrong. I stood there too long. Passengers shifted uncomfortably, waiting for me to move. So I did. I walked away, but I kept looking back. Row 14, seat C. Two men, same name, same seat. And that was only the beginning. The plane was sealed, doors locked, engines roaring. No way back. I tried to calm myself. Mistakes happen. Systems fail. Maybe it was just a glitch. That's what I told myself. But when I walked the aisle for service, my eyes kept drifting to row 14. And what I saw there made my skin crawl. The young man in the hoodie, Michael Reeves. The one I'd first seen sitting there, was slumped against the window, eyes closed, earbuds still in. But the pale man sat beside him. Same face, same hair, same expression, like twins, but not. Something about the pale man was wrong. He didn't move, didn't breathe the same way. His chest didn't rise and fall in rhythm with the other passengers. It was as if he was holding his breath forever. When I passed with the drinks cart, he didn't look at me. He just stared ahead, eyes unblinking, lips pressed tight, the kind of stillness you only see in the dead. I cleared my throat. Something to drink, sir? The young man with the hoodie nodded. Yeah, Coke, thanks. His voice was normal, human. But the pale man didn't answer. He didn't even twitch. Didn't blink when I set the cup down on his tray. And when the Coke can slid toward him with the tilt of the plane, it stopped, as if something invisible blocked it. Like the air around him was solid, passengers began whispering again. Are they brothers? Is this some kind of prank? Phones tilted trying to take pictures, but every picture came out wrong, blurry, streaked, like the pale man wasn't there at all. I reported it to the purser. She frowned, checked the manifest again, and shook her head. Both names still appear. Same booking reference, same passport number. That's not possible, I whispered. She looked at me, eyes serious. Then tell me who we reseat. Which one do I move? Which Michael Reeves is the real one? I didn't know. I couldn't tell. Later, when I checked row 14 again, something made me freeze. The young man, the one with the hoodie, had taken his earbuds out. He was staring straight ahead, face blank, his Coke untouched, his body rigid, and the pale man had leaned closer. So close their shoulders touched, like he was whispering into the young man's ear. Except his lips weren't moving. The young man's eyes flicked toward me, wide, terrified, like he wanted to scream, but couldn't. My stomach dropped. Something was wrong. So wrong, I forced myself to walk away. To keep serving! But I couldn't shake the feeling. Passengers complained of cold air near row 14, of lights flickering above their seats. One woman swore she heard two voices speaking in unison, but when I looked, only one man's lips were moving. By the time the cabin settled into uneasy sleep, I was trembling. I hid in the galley, pretending to organize trays, but really I was listening for the sound of footsteps in the aisle, for whispers that didn't belong, and just before midnight I heard it, a voice on the intercom, soft, male, repeating the same words over and over. I am Michael Reeves. I am Michael Reeves. I am Michael Reeves. The captain hadn't touched the mic. The first officer swore he hadn't either. And yet the voice echoed through the cabin, steady, unbroken, like a chant. Passengers stirred. Some sat up, confused. But when I rushed to row 14, both men were gone. The seats sat empty. Seatbelts buckled tight. 2 cups of Coke resting untouched on the trays. The only thing left behind was a boarding pass, crumpled, cold, and when I opened it, I froze. Because the paper showed my name, not his, not theirs, mine. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, to wake the entire cabin and shout, "Look, this isn't normal. Can't you feel it?" But my training kept me silent. A flight attendant does not panic, not even when the ground vanishes beneath her, not even when reality begins to tear apart. The boarding pass in my hand trembled. My name printed where it should have been, not Michael Reeves, not the hoodie boy, not the pale man. It was mine. Row 14, seat C. My pulse pounded in my throat. I shoved the pass into my pocket and forced myself to breathe. Passengers were stirring. The intercom voice had unsettled them. I had to calm the storm before it spread, so I walked the aisle again, smiling, reassuring, pretending nothing was wrong, but everything was wrong. The air felt heavy. The temperature dropped with every step closer to row 14. I could see my breath misting under the cabin lights. And when I reached the row, the seats weren't empty anymore. Both men were back. The hoodie boy slumped against the window, pale as death. His lips blue, his chest rising in shallow, uneven jerks, alive but barely, and the pale man, he was sitting upright, hands folded, a perfect smile carved across his face. For the first time, he looked at me. His eyes were bottomless, dark pits with no reflection. And he whispered, "You're in my seat." I froze. Passengers watched me. I couldn't scream, couldn't move. The purser appeared at my side, her face tight. She leaned close and hissed, "What are you doing? Get back to service." I opened my mouth to protest, to tell her the man shouldn't be here, that none of this made sense. But when I looked again, row 14 was empty, both seats vacant. Belts buckled. Nothing there. My purser stared at me like I'd lost my mind, and maybe I had. Hours dragged. The cabin dimmed. Most passengers slept uneasily, but I couldn't. I sat in the jump seat, shaking, listening. Every creak of the fuselage, every shift of turbulence, every whisper in the dark. At 2:17 a.m., a call light chimed. Row 14, I didn't want to go, but I had no choice. I walked down the aisle, each step heavier than the last. When I reached the seat, the pale man was there. Only him, alone. He didn't move when I approached. Didn't blink when I asked, "Did you press the call light, sir?" His lips parted, but the voice that came out wasn't his, it was mine, perfect, identical. "Sit down," my own voice said. My knees buckled. I gripped the headrest to keep from falling. Passengers stirred, muttering, confused by my reaction, but none of them seemed to see him. None of them looked at row 14. It was like the man existed only for me. And then, he was gone again. The seat empty, the light off. I staggered back to the galley, chest heaving. Tears burned at the corners of my eyes. And I thought, if this is a dream, let me wake up, please. But dreams don't leave evidence. Dreams don't leave cold breath in the air. Dreams don't whisper with your voice, and I wasn't dreaming. I was trapped, 30,000 feet in the sky, with something that wanted me gone. After midnight, the plane changed. Not the route, not the altitude. Something inside it. The hum became a voice. The lights sighed like lungs. Even the coffee tasted wrong. I had always known fear on a plane is different. It moves slow and precise. It doesn't roar. It insinuates. It slides under your skin like a thin blade. It doesn't make noise so much as rewrite the sounds you expect. The latch of an overhead bin becomes a footstep. The ding of a call light becomes a knock at a door. I began to miss things. Little things at first. A folded napkin left on a tray that I was sure I had tossed. A safety card that slid under a seat like it had been pushed. Then bigger things. A cup that would tilt and not spill. A passenger's reflection in a window that smiled when they didn't. Each small wrongness was a crack, and together they made a pattern I could not ignore. The purser said I was tired. "You've been working long shifts," she said, voice flat as a seatbelt. "You need rest." She handed me a lemon-sliced tin and told me to drink water. She didn't touch the manifest. She didn't look at row 14. She didn't see the way the numbers on the screen seemed to shimmer when I glanced at them, as if the text were breathing. When turbulence came, it came like a blade, sharp and sudden. The overhead bins shook. Trays trembled. People grabbed armrests. The plane lurched and the cabin pitched into a chorus of prayers and curses. We hit a pocket of air that did not belong to the sky. And for an awful second, the world tilted so violently that luggage slid and a woman screamed. When the passengers quieted, the captain's voice came over the PA, calm, measured. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've encountered unexpected turbulence. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened." His voice was the recorded calm of a man who believes in the rules of physics, but the rules had already shifted. I kept thinking of the pale man and the hoodie boy, of my boarding pass in my pocket, with my name where theirs should have been, of the echoing chant. The crew moved like actors on a stage built on a rotten floor. We all remembered our lines. We all forgot the scenery was wrong. After the turbulence, the lights dimmed to a blue so deep it was nearly black. The display at the front flashed the flight map, then white noise. The purser muttered something about a software glitch and opened the curtain to check the cockpit. She came back looking rattled. "They're both awake," she whispered to me, eyes wide and flat. "Both of them are in the cockpit." My throat closed. "What do you mean?" She pointed to the forward camera feed on her tablet. "Row 14, 2 seats, 2 bodies." But the cockpit footage, which by regulation is supposed to show only pilots and instruments, never the cabin, flickered, and then it showed row 14. 2 men standing at the cockpit door. My ears rang with a thin, high sound. Neither figure was moving toward the pilots. They were facing the cabin as if watching us all. I forced myself to move, to act like a person who understood reality. I stood and walked toward the cockpit door. My legs felt like they belonged to someone else. Passengers looked up as I passed. Some smiled. Some frowned. None of them met my eyes. It was as if I were invisible. The pale man's curse extended to me alone. When I reached the cockpit door, the captain opened it. He looked at me with a tired politeness, the sort of look pilots give when they know a passenger has lost something non-essential. A phone, it could be. "Can I help you?" he asked. I swallowed. "There are 2 passengers in row 14. My words stuttered like a bad engine. The captain's face sharpened. "Who?" he asked. "Names?" I told him. "Michael Reeves, twice." He frowned, shuffled through digital paperwork, then shook his head. There's only one Michael Reeves on the manifest. He handed me his tablet. I took it and read. The screen listed names, seat numbers, passport numbers. It was clean, clinical. All the rows were accounted for, or so it seemed. When I looked down again, the screen had my name on it. Not just listed under crew, not just in the log, but in the passenger list. Row 14, seat C. My name was printed next to a star that pulsed like a heartbeat. See? The captain said, voice low as if he didn't want the cabin to hear. This is just a software bug or a tired brain. But the purser didn't laugh. She looked like a woman who'd been told to ignore the smell of smoke. We can't ignore it, she said. We will note it. We will file a report when we land. I wanted paperwork. I wanted checkboxes and signatures and the clean closure of bureaucracy. I wanted something that would make the plane concrete again. Instead, I got the sound of someone softly humming my name in the galley, a lullaby that wasn't music. A child cried 3 rows up. A man 2 seats down began to cough as if trying to expel something lodged in his throat. The hoodie boy, when I looked back, had both hands clenched so hard his nails were white. The pale man tilted his head like an animal hearing something in the distance. He smiled in a way that did not touch his eyes. At 3:44 a.m., the lights went out completely. Not a dim, not a lull in the hum. Everything died for 12 heartbeats. The plane uttered a long, low groan and then settled into an absolute suffocating black. People screamed. People prayed. The call lights flicked on like the sprouting of red flowers. I felt for the handrail and found the seat back next to row 14. My fingers found fabric that should have been occupied and instead brushed skin that was cold as a winter window. I recoiled. The dark pressed in like a thing with substance. Something moved along the aisle. Soft steps. Steps that seemed to come from everywhere. When the lights returned, row 14 was empty. Both seats vacated. 2 crumpled boarding passes lay on the floor. One had the hoodie boy's name scrawled on it. The other was a blank scrap, yellowed and fragile like a ticket torn from a playbill. But when I picked it up, my handwriting crawled across the paper. My name appeared in a hand I recognized because it felt like a bruise. I ran to the lavatory and locked myself in. My hands shook as I looked in the mirror. The woman who stared back had my face, but her eyes looked as if they had been on a long journey through cold places. They were smaller, sunken. She breathed. Barely. She mouthed one word, a prayer or a plea. Not yet, she said to her reflection. Not yet. When I left the lavatory, the purser met me with a tablet in her hand. She showed me the manifest again. Cleaned, corrected, ordinary. We'll handle it when we land, she said, and there was finality in her tone as if she had closed a door on something that might have been alive. I wanted to believe her. I wanted the heat of ordinary things, but as we circled for approach, my chest constricted with the certainty that the plane carried a debt. It was not a sum of money. It was a tally. It was a seat taken and a name that would not be erased. And in my pocket, the boarding pass with my name warmed like a live thing. It pulsed faintly against my skin as if my heart had learned a new rhythm, one that belonged to row 14 and not to me. The descent began, that heavy tilt of gravity, the hum shifting pitch as the plane lowered into the night. Passengers stirred, seatbelts clicked, shades lifted. I should have felt relief. We were almost home. But I didn't. The air in the cabin was thick, pressurized in a way that had nothing to do with altitude. Every breath was a struggle. Every blink carried static across my vision. The purser's voice came over the PA. Cabin crew, prepare for landing. But her voice cracked on the last word, like it wasn't her at all. I checked row 14 one last time. The seats were empty. No hoodie boy, no pale man, and yet the belts were buckled. The cups were full. Condensation still slid down the plastic as if someone had just taken a sip. I reached into my pocket. The boarding pass burned against my skin. I pulled it out. The letters had changed again. Not just my name. Not just my seat. It said the passenger count 152 must remain. I froze. I knew the number. I had counted. There were only 151 people on this flight, passengers and crew combined. And yet the system demanded one more. One seat unpaid, one soul unclaimed. The missing one was me. The plane jolted hard. Wheels touched down with a scream of rubber and steel. Applause rippled weakly through the cabin. The usual relief of the living, but I knew better. Landing meant nothing. We taxied to the gate. The lights blazed bright. Passengers unbuckled, stretched, gathered bags. Smiles returned to tired faces, but not mine. Not when I glanced at the window and saw my reflection. Because it wasn't me. The glass showed the pale man's face, grinning, mouthing words I could not hear. And behind him, the boy in the hoodie, lips blue, eyes empty, staring at me like a mirror of what I would become. I staggered back, gasping. The purser touched my arm. "Are you all right?" But her voice was far away. The crowd pressed forward. Passengers leaving, their laughter echoing too loud. I remained frozen, still strapped in my jump seat. Unable to move, one by one, passengers walked down the jet bridge. The cabin emptied, bags gone, lights dimmed, and yet, row 14 was never empty. When the last passenger left, I looked again. 2 figures sat there, the pale man, the hoodie boy. They turned in perfect unison and smiled, and that's when I understood. This wasn't my testimony. This wasn't my memory. This was my replacement. My confession left behind like a black box recording. Because I never walked off that plane, I am still on board, seat 14C, waiting for the next flight. And when you board, if the air feels too cold, if the light flickers, if you hear a voice that sounds like your own, don't sit there. Don't look at me. Don't take my seat, because it's already taken.